They ruled like gods, built monuments that defied time, and prepared for the afterlife with rituals more elaborate than life itself. From the towering pyramids of Giza to the golden mask of Tutankhamun, welcome to ancient Egypt, a land of pharaohs, pyramids, and mummies. Who were these rulers? Why were they obsessed with death? And what secrets still lie buried beneath the desert sands? Ancient Egypt, a civilization carved in stone and spirit. Ancient Egypt stands as one of the most iconic and enduring civilizations in human history. From the shimmering sands of the Nile Valley emerged a culture so deeply rooted in power, spirituality, and monumentality that its legacy continues to captivate the world thousands of years later. Stretching across more than 3 millennia, ancient Egypt was not only a realm of powerful pharaohs and monumental architecture, but also a civilization that wove religion, governance, and daily life into a seamless whole. Its influence permeated neighboring regions, contributed to the development of writing and statecraft, and left behind monuments that still command awe. Even today, the mysteries of Egypt, its mummies, pyramids, and deified rulers, fuel modern imagination, academic study, and global fascination. At the heart of Egypt's identity was the institution of kingship. The pharaoh was far more than a monarch. He was a divine figure, considered the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon-headed god, and the son of Ra, the sun god. Kingship in Egypt was inseparable from religion, and pharaohs were responsible not only for governance, but also for maintaining Ma'at, the divine order of truth, justice, and balance. Through elaborate rituals, military campaigns, and temple-building projects, the pharaohs legitimized their rule and reinforced their divine connection. This fusion of state and faith provided Egypt with a political and spiritual coherence unmatched in the ancient world. One of the most visible legacies of ancient Egypt is its architecture, particularly the pyramids, temples, and tombs that continue to dominate the landscape. The construction of the pyramids at Giza, among the 7 wonders of the ancient world, testifies to the Egyptians' mastery of engineering and labor organization. These massive stone structures were not merely tombs, they were sacred gateways to the afterlife, designed to ensure the eternal survival of the pharaoh's soul. Likewise, sprawling temple complexes like Karnak and Luxor served as religious, political, and cultural centers. Each monument, carved with hieroglyphics and adorned with statues of gods and kings, was a declaration of divine power and eternal life. This obsession with eternity was not limited to royalty. The afterlife was a central theme in Egyptian thought and practice. Egyptians believed life on earth was but a preparation for the journey beyond death. Elaborate burial rituals, detailed funerary texts like the Book of the Dead, and careful preservation of the body through mummification all point to a civilization deeply preoccupied with death and rebirth. Tombs were stocked with goods, amulets, and even servants, whether real or symbolic, to assist the deceased in the next world. This belief in life after death shaped art, literature, and religious practices across all levels of society. In sum, ancient Egypt's legacy is built upon its unshakable belief in divine kingship, its unparalleled architectural achievements, and its richly imagined afterlife. These interconnected themes offer a window into a civilization that not only survived for centuries, but also sought to transcend time itself. As we explore the world of the pharaohs, pyramids, and mummies, we step into a culture that dared to dream of immortality and nearly achieved it. Geography and the gift of the Nile, the lifeblood of ancient Egypt. The story of ancient Egypt is above all the story of the Nile River, flowing more than 6,600 kilometers from the heart of Africa to the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile was, and remains, the longest river in the world. But to the ancient Egyptians, it was far more than a river. It was a divine artery that nourished their land, shaped their society, and defined their identity. Without the Nile, there would have been no Egypt. Its waters turned the surrounding desert into a fertile paradise and enabled the rise of one of the world's most extraordinary civilizations. The Nile as a source of life. The Nile flows from south to north, and every year it flooded predictably during the summer months due to heavy rains in the Ethiopian highlands. These annual inundations deposited rich black silt along the riverbanks, creating the Black Land, or Kemet, as the Egyptians called it. This fertile soil stood in stark contrast to the surrounding Red Land, or Desert, the barren desert that encircled the Nile Valley. This clear divide shaped Egyptian geography and defined the boundaries of civilization. The Nile's floods were not feared, but celebrated. The ancient Egyptians relied on them to rejuvenate their fields and sustain their crops. Without this natural irrigation system, farming in Egypt would have been nearly impossible. The consistency of the flood cycle allowed Egypt to develop a stable agricultural calendar, which in turn supported the rise of permanent settlements, large-scale farming, and eventually complex institutions of governance, taxation, and religion. Agricultural abundance and prosperity. Thanks to the Nile's life-giving waters, Egypt became one of the most agriculturally productive regions of the ancient world. Farmers cultivated staple crops such as wheat, barley, flax, and vegetables. They also maintained orchards of dates, figs, and pomegranates. The abundance of food allowed the civilization to grow and thrive. It supported a class of skilled artisans, architects, scribes, priests, and administrators, people who could dedicate themselves to pursuits beyond mere survival. Surplus grain could be stored for times of drought or traded with neighboring regions, making Egypt a wealthy and influential player in the ancient world. The Nile also provided fish and waterfowl, which supplemented the Egyptian diet, and its reeds were used to produce papyrus, a vital material for writing and record-keeping. A highway of communication and trade, the Nile was more than a source of food. It was also Egypt's main transportation artery. With the prevailing winds blowing south and the river's current flowing north, Egyptians could easily travel in both directions. This made the Nile a natural highway, facilitating the movement of goods, people, armies, and ideas. Trade flourished up and down the river, linking cities and regions and uniting Upper and Lower Egypt into a single cultural and political entity. Boats carried limestone for temple construction, cedarwood from Lebanon for shipbuilding, and gold from Nubia for royal tombs. Trade expeditions launched from the Nile's banks reached distant lands like Punt and Byblos, expanding Egypt's influence far beyond its borders. Cultural and religious significance. To the Egyptians, the Nile was not just practical, it was sacred. It was believed to be a gift from the gods, particularly Hapi, the deity of the inundation. The river's cycles were thought to reflect the will of the gods and were marked by festivals, prayers, and rituals. Temples were often aligned with the river, and many myths, such as the rebirth of Osiris, were linked to its rhythms. The Nile also oriented Egyptian society geographically and spiritually. Maps were drawn with the river at the center. The East Bank, where the sun rose, was associated with life and the land of the living, while the West Bank, where the sun set, was considered the land of the dead. This is why tombs and cemeteries were typically placed west of the Nile. Conclusion. In every sense, the Nile River was the beating heart of ancient Egypt. It sustained life, shaped culture, inspired religion, and enabled empire. The Egyptians rightly called their land the gift of the Nile, for it was through this sacred river that civilization first flourished in the desert and left behind a legacy that still flows through human history. The Pharaoh, god-kings of the Nile, divine kingship and the political structure of ancient Egypt. At the heart of ancient Egypt's extraordinary civilization stood a singular, semi-divine figure, the Pharaoh. More than just a ruler, the Pharaoh was considered a living god on earth, the essential link between the divine and the mortal realms. He was the earthly embodiment of the falcon god Horus, and upon death became one with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. This belief in divine kingship set ancient Egypt apart from many other ancient societies, where rulers might have claimed divine favor, but rarely divinity itself. The role of the pharaoh extended far beyond politics. He was the military commander, chief priest, lawmaker, and patron of monumental architecture. His primary responsibility was maintaining Ma'at, the principle of destroy. Maintaining Ma'at was seen as vital for survival. A successful pharaoh ensured agricultural fertility, national unity, and divine favor. The political structure of Egypt reflected this divine hierarchy. The pharaoh stood at the top, but his rule was supported by a vast bureaucracy. The vizier, or chief minister, was second in command, managing day-to-day governance, taxation, justice, and state records. Below the vizier were provincial governors, nomarchs, scribes, military commanders, and temple priests, each ensuring the stability and function of the state. This centralized system enabled Egypt to remain remarkably stable over thousands of years. To understand the evolution of this kingship, it is important to examine some of the most influential pharaohs in Egyptian history, rulers whose lives and legacies illuminate the power, responsibilities, and personalities of Egypt's god-kings. Narmer, the unifier of Egypt. Narmer, also known as Menes, is traditionally credited with unifying Upper and Lower Egypt around 3100 BCE. This monumental achievement marked the beginning of Egypt's dynastic era and the First Dynasty. The Narmer Palette, one of the most important archaeological artifacts from this period, symbolically depicts Narmer wearing the crowns of both Upper and Lower Egypt, establishing him as the first pharaoh of a united kingdom. His unification of Egypt was more than a military conquest. It was a cultural and religious integration that laid the foundation for pharaonic rule. By consolidating power and centralizing administration, Narmer created the model for divine kingship that would endure for over 3,000 years. Djoser, the innovator of monumental architecture, Pharaoh Djoser of the Third Dynasty, c. 2670 BCE, is best known for commissioning the Step Pyramid of Saqqara, the first monumental stone building in history. Designed by his brilliant architect Imhotep, this structure represented a quantum leap in Egyptian architecture, transitioning from traditional mastaba tombs to large-scale pyramidal forms. Djoser's reign marked a period of great innovation and centralization. The Step Pyramid was not just a tomb, it was a spiritual symbol, a stairway to the heavens, reaffirming the divine status of the king. This project set the stage for the Great Pyramids of Giza and demonstrated the pharaoh's ability to command vast resources and labor for spiritual and national purpose. Hatshepsut, Egypt's female pharaoh. Among the many pharaohs, Hatshepsut stands out not only for being a woman in a traditionally male role, but for the grandeur and success of her reign. She ruled during the 18th dynasty, circa 1479 to 1458 BCE, and styled herself as king rather than queen. In statues and reliefs, she is often depicted with the traditional pharaonic beard and regalia. Hatshepsut oversaw a peaceful and prosperous period marked by ambitious building projects, including her magnificent mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri, which remains one of Egypt's most beautiful architectural achievements. She also revitalized trade, sending expeditions to the legendary land of Punt, bringing back incense, gold, ebony, and exotic animals. Her reign challenged gender norms and demonstrated that effective rulership in Egypt was rooted more in divine favor and administrative competence than gender. After her death, later rulers attempted to erase her legacy, chiseling her name from monuments, though modern archaeology has since restored her place in history. Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh. Perhaps no pharaoh was more controversial than Akhenaten, formerly Amenhotep IV, who ruled in the 14th century BCE during the 18th dynasty. He instigated one of the most radical religious reforms in Egyptian history, abandoning the traditional polytheism in favor of monotheistic worship of the sun disk, Aten. Akhenaten moved the capital to a new city, Akhetaten, modern Amarna, and rebranded himself as the sole intermediary between Aten and the people. This era, known as the Amarna period, produced distinctive art and architecture, depicting the royal family in intimate and unusually naturalistic ways. While Akhenaten's religious revolution was groundbreaking, it was short-lived. After his death, Egypt quickly returned to its traditional gods and priesthoods. Later rulers labeled him a heretic and sought to erase his memory, but his challenge to orthodoxy remains one of the most fascinating episodes in Egyptian history. Tutankhamun, the boy king with an enduring legacy. Tutankhamun, Akhenaten's likely son or close relative, ascended to the throne as a child and ruled for only a decade, circa 1332 to 1323 BCE. Although his reign was relatively insignificant politically, it was crucial symbolically. Under the guidance of powerful advisors, Tutankhamun reversed many of Akhenaten's religious reforms, restoring the traditional gods and moving the capital back to Thebes. For centuries, Tutankhamun was largely forgotten, until the discovery of his nearly intact tomb by Howard Carter in 1922. The tomb's stunning treasures, including the iconic golden death mask, catapulted him to international fame and reawakened global interest in ancient Egypt. Tutankhamun's legacy lies not in his achievements, but in the window his burial provides into ancient Egyptian art, ritual, and funerary practice. His tomb remains one of the most important archaeological finds of all time. Ramses II, the great builder and warrior, often regarded as Egypt's greatest pharaoh, Ramses II reigned 1279 to 1213 BCE, ruled during the 19th dynasty, and left a legacy of military prowess, monumental architecture, and diplomatic achievement. Known as Ramses the Great, he ruled for 66 years and fathered over 100 children. Ramses led military campaigns against the Hittites and other rivals, most notably the Battle of Kadesh, which ended in one of history's first known peace treaties. Although he often exaggerated his victories, Ramses was a skilled propagandist who understood the power of image and legacy. His architectural achievements are vast and include the magnificent Abu Simbel temples, the Ramesseum, and contributions to Karnak and Luxor. These constructions reinforced his status as a divine ruler and immortalized his name in stone. Ramses II's reign marked the high point of Egypt's imperial power, and later generations revered him as the ideal pharaoh. Some scholars even associate him with the pharaoh mentioned in the biblical Exodus, although this remains speculative. Conclusion: the pharaohs of ancient Egypt were more than monarchs. They were divine rulers whose authority extended into every aspect of life. As god kings, they were tasked with maintaining cosmic order, upholding justice, expanding the empire, and ensuring the prosperity of the land. Through immense building projects, religious reforms, military conquests, and cultural patronage, They left behind a legacy carved into stone and woven into the fabric of history. From Narmer's unification of the two lands to Ramses II's golden age of empire, the pharaohs shaped not only the course of Egyptian history, but also the very idea of kingship. Whether revolutionary like Akhenaten, enigmatic like Tutankhamun, or powerful like Hatshepsut, each pharaoh contributed to a story that still resonates with mystery, grandeur, and enduring fascination. Their reigns remind us that in ancient Egypt, the line between God and man was blurred, and the legacy of these god kings still echoes along the Nile. The pyramids, monuments to eternity. Introduction: eternal symbols of divine kingship. Among the most iconic and enduring symbols of ancient Egypt are its pyramids, massive, geometric stone structures that have fascinated explorers, archaeologists, and travelers for millennia. Rising from the desert sands like celestial stairways to the heavens, these monuments were not merely tombs. They were eternal homes for the divine kings of Egypt. They embodied the belief that the pharaohs, as god kings, deserved monumental structures to assist their souls on the journey to the afterlife. Most astonishing of all is that the pyramids, especially the Great Pyramid of Giza, were built over 4,500 years ago, and yet still stand as some of the most precise and massive stone constructions in the world. Their history is not just a story of stone and symmetry, but of evolving religious ideologies, human effort, and enduring mysteries. The evolution of pyramid building. Egyptian tomb architecture evolved dramatically over time. In the earliest dynasties, pharaohs were buried in mastabas, rectangular, flat-roofed structures made of mud brick or stone. These early tombs, while significant, lacked the vertical grandeur that would later define Egyptian royal burials. The true revolution came during the reign of Pharaoh Djoser of the Third Dynasty, c. 2670 BCE, who commissioned his architect, Imhotep, to build a more impressive tomb. The result was the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, a series of stacked mastabas that rose into the sky in 6 distinct levels. This was the world's first large-scale stone monument and the earliest known pyramid. Following Djoser's innovation, pyramid building progressed rapidly. During the Fourth Dynasty, architects began constructing true pyramids with smooth sides, representing a sunbeam pointing toward the sky. This design reflected evolving religious beliefs, especially the pharaoh's connection to Ra, the sun god. The bent pyramid of Pharaoh Sneferu at Dashur shows the transitional phase from step to true pyramid. Its lower half rises steeply before abruptly changing angle, possibly due to structural issues. Sneferu later completed the Red Pyramid, Egypt's first successful true pyramid with smooth sides. The pinnacle of this evolution came with the pyramids of Giza, built during the reigns of Sneferu's successors, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. These pyramids represented not only architectural achievement, but also religious devotion, royal propaganda, and the sheer organizational might of the Egyptian state. Construction techniques and labor forces. The question of how the ancient Egyptians built the pyramids has captivated scholars for centuries. With no advanced machinery and only copper tools, they managed to quarry, transport, and assemble millions of limestone and granite blocks, some weighing over 70 tons. Contrary to the popular myth of slaves toiling under brutal conditions, modern archaeology suggests that the pyramid builders were skilled laborers, well-fed, respected, and organized into rotating work gangs. Excavations near the Giza Plateau have uncovered workers' villages, complete with dormitories, bakeries, breweries, and medical facilities. These laborers were likely conscripted from across Egypt to serve for a few months at a time, fulfilling a form of national duty similar to military service or tax payment. The building process itself began at nearby quarries, where limestone blocks were cut using copper chisels and dolerite pounders. The stones were then transported using sledges, wooden rollers, or boats along canals from the Nile. A system of ramps, likely straight or spiral, was used to drag blocks up to each level of the growing pyramid. What made this feat possible was meticulous organization. Skilled engineers, architects, and overseers coordinated thousands of workers with a centralized supply chain providing food, water, and tools. The result was a complex logistical operation that could rival modern construction projects, the Great Pyramid of Giza and its mysteries. The most famous of all pyramids is the Great Pyramid of Khufu, Cheops, constructed around 2560 BCE. Originally standing at 146.6 meters, 481 feet, it remained the tallest man-made structure on Earth for over 3,800 years. Even today, it astounds with its precision. Each side of its base is almost perfectly aligned with the cardinal directions and measures approximately 230.4 meters, 755.9 feet. The massive structure consists of an estimated 2.3 million blocks, with a total weight of nearly 6 million tons. Despite centuries of study, many mysteries still surround the Great Pyramid. How was such accuracy achieved with primitive tools? How did builders lift multi-ton blocks so high? Why are there hidden chambers, shafts, and voids inside? One of the most debated aspects is the internal structure. The pyramid contains several chambers, including the King's Chamber, Queen's Chamber, and the Grand Gallery, each with precise alignment and purpose. Recently, a massive void was discovered above the Grand Gallery using cosmic ray imaging, muon tomography, suggesting the presence of an undiscovered space or chamber. Its purpose remains unknown. Another mystery is the function of the air shafts extending from the King's and Queen's chambers. Some believe they were ventilation tunnels. Others argue they had religious or astronomical significance, possibly aligning with specific stars such as Orion's Belt and Sirius, celestial bodies associated with the afterlife. Also enigmatic is the lost capstone or pyramidion, which once topped the Great Pyramid but has never been found. Scholars speculate it may have been made of electrum, a gold and silver alloy, and reflected the sun's rays, symbolizing the Pharaoh's ascension to the heavens. The Great Pyramid is also aligned with astonishing precision. The sides deviate from true north by less than 1/15 of a degree. Some researchers argue this demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of astronomy and geography, far beyond what was previously thought possible for the time. Legacy of the pyramids. The Pyramid Age peaked during the Old Kingdom and gradually declined in the Middle and New Kingdoms when rulers began building tombs in hidden valleys, such as the Valley of the Kings. Yet the symbolism of the pyramid endured. Its form, pointing skyward, remained a powerful image of ascent and eternity. To the Egyptians, the pyramid was not simply a tomb, it was a resurrection machine, a place where the soul, or Ka, could ascend to join the gods. The structure itself embodied sacred geometry, solar worship, and the enduring power of the pharaoh's divine role. In later centuries, the pyramids became symbols of mystery and wonder. The Greeks, Romans, Arabs, and eventually modern archaeologists all speculated about their construction and purpose. The Great Pyramid, in particular, was listed by ancient scholars as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and today it is the only one still standing. Conclusion. The pyramids of ancient Egypt are more than engineering marvels. They are eternal testaments to a civilization's vision of life, death, and the cosmos. Rising from the banks of the Nile with mathematical precision and spiritual ambition, They reflect a culture where kingship, religion, and society converged in stone. Their scale, complexity, and symbolism continue to challenge modern understanding and inspire awe. Among them, the Great Pyramid of Giza stands as the apex of human ingenuity, labor, and devotion. It remains not only a monument to Pharaoh Khufu, but to the enduring mystery and majesty of the civilization that dared to reach for eternity. The Pyramids, Monuments to Eternity. Introduction: Eternal symbols of divine kingship. Among the most iconic and enduring symbols of ancient Egypt are its pyramids, massive, geometric stone structures that have fascinated explorers, archaeologists, and travelers for millennia. Rising from the desert sands like celestial stairways to the heavens, these monuments were not merely tombs. They were eternal homes for the divine kings of Egypt. They embodied the belief that the pharaohs, as god-kings, deserved monumental structures to assist their souls on the journey to the afterlife. Most astonishing of all is that the pyramids, especially the Great Pyramid of Giza, were built over 4,500 years ago and yet still stand as some of the most precise and massive stone constructions in the world. Their history is not just a story of stone and symmetry, but of evolving religious ideologies, human effort, and enduring mysteries. Religious beliefs about the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that life did not end with death. Rather, it transformed. Death was the beginning of a long and perilous journey to the afterlife, culminating in the Field of Reeds, a perfect, eternal version of life on earth, where the deceased could live happily among the gods. However, gaining access to this paradise required spiritual preparation and physical preservation. Central to these beliefs were the multiple components of the soul: Ka, the life force that needed nourishment and a physical body to inhabit; Ba, the unique personality or spirit that could travel between the worlds of the living and the dead; Ak, the transformed divine form of the soul, achieved after judgment and unification of Ka and Ba. To keep these aspects intact, the body had to be preserved. Without it, the Ka would perish, the Ba would be lost, and the Ak could never be formed. This theological underpinning made embalming and mummification an essential religious duty rather than a mere cultural custom. Moreover, the Book of the Dead, a collection of funerary texts and spells, offered guidance to navigate the dangers of the underworld. The heart, believed to be the seat of intelligence and morality, was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, truth. If lighter, the soul passed into paradise. If heavier, it was devoured by the monstrous Ammit. The embalming process, from death to resurrection. Mummification was a highly specialized, sacred art carried out by professional embalmers, often priests of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming. The process took approximately 70 days and involved numerous steps aimed at halting decay, preserving appearance, and protecting the spiritual essence of the deceased. 1. Purification and preparation. The body was first washed with water from the Nile and purified using sacred oils and resins. Priests conducted ceremonies to honor the gods and ensure the sanctity of the process. The deceased was then laid on an embalming table, usually made of stone or wood. 2. Removal of internal organs. To prevent decomposition, the embalmers removed the internal organs. A small incision was made on the left side of the abdomen to extract the stomach, intestines, lungs, and liver. These were individually embalmed and stored in canopic jars, each guarded by one of the 4 sons of Horus. Imseti, human head, protected the liver. Hapi, baboon head, protected the lungs. Duamutef, jackal head, protected the stomach. Kepesanuef, falcon head, protected the intestines. The heart, crucial for the judgment of the soul, was ideally left inside the body. In some cases, it was removed and replaced with a heart scarab amulet to ensure favorable judgment in the afterlife. The brain, surprisingly, was considered unimportant and was extracted through the nose using a hook, then discarded. 3. Drying the body. The next step involved dehydration. The body was buried in natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture, for 40 days. This effectively dried out the flesh and prevented bacterial decay. After drying, the body was again washed and anointed with perfumes and sacred oils to keep the skin soft and to repel evil spirits. 4. Stuffing and restoration. To maintain a lifelike appearance, the embalmers stuffed the body with linen, sawdust, resin, or even mud. Facial features were restored using wax and paint. Artificial eyes and wigs were often added, especially for elites and royalty. 5. Wrapping the mummy. Wrapping the body was both protective and symbolic. Fine linen strips, often hundreds of meters in total, were used, layer by layer. Amulets were inserted between layers to protect various parts of the body and soul. Each amulet had specific functions. Ankh, symbol of life. Jed pillar, stability. Eye of Horus, Ujat, protection and healing. Scarab beetle, rebirth. Priests chanted spells during the wrapping process to ensure spiritual protection. The final touch was placing a death mask over the face, often made of cartonnage or gold for nobility, the most famous being the golden mask of Tutankhamun. Final rites and sealing the tomb. Before burial, a priest conducted the opening of the mouth ceremony, in which the mummy's senses were symbolically restored. This allowed the deceased to eat, speak, and breathe in the afterlife. The mummy was then placed in a decorated coffin, which could be a single sarcophagus or a nested set of coffins, often elaborately painted with religious texts and divine imagery. Tomb goods and burial rituals. The journey to the afterlife required more than just a preserved body. The tomb had to be equipped with everything the deceased might need: clothing, food, furniture, tools, and even servants. These provisions were not considered symbolic, but practical. If the deceased had needed them in life, they would need them again in the field of reeds. Tomb goods, shabtis or ushabtis, small figurines buried with the deceased to perform manual labor on their behalf in the afterlife. Some tombs contained hundreds of these, each inscribed with a magical spell. Food offerings, bread, beer, fruits, meats, and jars of wine were common. Painted depictions of food and feasting on tomb walls also acted as substitutes if physical offerings failed. Jewelry and amulets. Items worn in life were also buried to demonstrate status and provide magical protection. Furniture and daily items. Beds, chairs, chariots, and even board games like Senet accompanied the dead, ensuring their comfort and leisure in eternity. Burial rituals. Burials were elaborate, especially for royalty and the elite. Processions led the coffin to the tomb, accompanied by priests, mourners, musicians, and sometimes professional wailers. Offerings were made, and funerary texts were recited. Tombs were decorated with vibrant wall paintings, showing scenes from daily life, religious rituals, and images of the gods. These depictions were meant to come alive in the afterlife, surrounding the deceased with familiar comforts and divine guidance. In the case of pharaohs, entire mortuary temples were built adjacent to their tombs. These served as places of worship for generations, with priests conducting daily offerings to honor the dead king and maintain the flow of Ma'at. Social variation in mummification. While the full embalming process was reserved for the wealthy, simplified versions were available to commoners. These might involve natural desiccation in desert graves or minimal wrapping. The quality of mummification was directly tied to social status and wealth. But even the poorest Egyptians hoped to achieve some form of bodily preservation to reach the afterlife. Legacy and influence. The practice of mummification continued in Egypt for over 3,000 years, evolving through the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms, and persisting even into the Greco-Roman period. Over time, techniques improved and regional styles emerged. Mummification influenced surrounding cultures and even captured the curiosity of early Europeans, who sometimes used mummy powder for medicinal purposes in the Middle Ages. In modern times, the study of mummies has provided invaluable insights into ancient medicine, diet, genetics, and disease. Technologies like CT scans and DNA testing have allowed researchers to unwrap mummies non-destructively, unlocking secrets once buried for millennia. Religion and mythology in daily life. A divine world along the Nile. In ancient Egypt, religion was not confined to temples or sacred texts. It was woven into every aspect of daily life. The Egyptians saw the divine in the rising of the sun, the flooding of the Nile, the success of their harvests, and even the beating of their hearts. Their world was animated by a vast pantheon of gods and goddesses, each with unique attributes, responsibilities, and personalities. Religion was not just a belief system. It was a framework for understanding existence, maintaining order, and ensuring prosperity in this world and the next. Gods and goddesses, the divine family. Egyptian mythology was populated by a rich and complex pantheon of deities. These gods were not remote or abstract. They were intimately involved in the workings of nature and society. Many were associated with animals or natural elements, and their forms reflected their roles. Ra, the sun god, was the supreme deity who traveled across the sky by day and through the underworld by night, bringing light and rebirth. Osiris, god of the afterlife, represented resurrection and eternal life. He was the first mummy, a symbol of death overcome. Isis, his devoted wife, was the goddess of magic, healing, and motherhood. Her myths emphasized loyalty and compassion. Horus, the falcon-headed god of kingship, was the protector of the pharaoh and the embodiment of divine justice. Anubis, with the head of a jackal, guided souls to the afterlife and presided over mummification. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, oversaw writing, knowledge, and the recording of divine judgment. Each god played a role in maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic order. Their myths were not only spiritual stories, but moral guides and explanations for natural phenomena. Ordinary Egyptians invoked these deities in times of need, worshipped them through household shrines, and trusted them to protect their families, crops, and souls. Temples and rituals, connecting heaven and earth temples, were the sacred homes of the gods on earth. Grand complexes like Karnak, Luxor, and Abydos were not places for public worship in the modern sense, but divine residences maintained by a priestly class. These priests performed daily rituals to awaken the gods each morning, offer them food and incense, and put them to rest each evening. The rituals were believed to sustain the gods' presence and favor. Every temple had a sanctuary where the statue of the deity resided. Only priests and the pharaoh were allowed into these inner sanctums. However, festivals like Opet or Beautiful Feast of the Valley allowed ordinary Egyptians to participate in processions, music, and celebrations as the gods were carried out of their temples in ceremonial boats. In homes, people left offerings to minor deities, painted protective symbols on walls, and wore amulets to guard against evil. Religion permeated personal and public life alike, from birth and marriage to death and burial. Achievements in art, writing, and science. A civilization of beauty, knowledge, and innovation. Ancient Egypt was not only a land of pyramids and pharaohs, It was a civilization that achieved remarkable advances in the arts, sciences, and written language. These achievements were not isolated from religion or governance, but deeply integrated into the cultural fabric. Through hieroglyphic writing, sophisticated medical practices, precise astronomical observations, and breathtaking art and literature, the Egyptians left an intellectual and aesthetic legacy that continues to influence the modern world. Hieroglyphics, the sacred script. One of ancient Egypt's most enduring contributions is its writing system, hieroglyphics. Developed around 3200 BCE, hieroglyphics combined logographic and alphabetic elements, using over 700 symbols to represent sounds, objects, and ideas. The word hieroglyph means sacred carving, reflecting the belief that writing was a divine gift from Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. Hieroglyphics adorned temple walls, tombs, obelisks, and monuments, recording everything from royal decrees to religious hymns. For everyday use, Egyptians developed simpler scripts: hieratic for religious and administrative texts, and demotic for legal and commercial documents. Scribes, trained from a young age, held high status in society. They were responsible for keeping records, copying sacred texts, and preserving the knowledge that underpinned Egypt's bureaucracy, religion, and culture. The Decipherment of Hieroglyphics by Jean-François Champollion in the 19th century. Using the Rosetta Stone opened a new chapter in understanding Egypt's ancient wisdom, medicine, astronomy, and mathematics. Egyptians made significant advances in science, driven by practical needs and religious beliefs. Medicine was remarkably advanced for its time. Physicians diagnosed and treated a wide range of ailments using herbal remedies, surgical techniques, and magical spells. Texts like the Ebers Papyrus and Edwin Smith Papyrus reveal knowledge of anatomy, wound care, and even early forms of dentistry and brain surgery. In astronomy, Egyptians closely observed the stars and planetary movements, mainly for religious and agricultural purposes. The heliacal rising of Sirius, the dog star, was used to predict the annual flooding of the Nile. They developed a solar calendar with 365 days, organized into 12 months of 30 days plus 5 feast days, an early forerunner of our modern calendar. Mathematics was essential for measuring land, constructing pyramids, and managing grain supplies. They used a decimal system based on units of 10 and understood basic principles of geometry and algebra. Concepts such as area, volume, and angles were used in architectural design, especially in the precise layout of temples and tombs. Literature and art, expressions of eternal truth. Egyptian literature reflected the values and beliefs of society. Wisdom texts, such as the Instruction of Ptahhotep, offered moral guidance. Stories like the Tale of Sinuhe and the Shipwrecked Sailor blended adventure with philosophical reflection. Religious hymns and love poetry show emotional depth and literary elegance. Art was deeply symbolic, governed by strict rules to convey meaning and order. Wall paintings, statues, and reliefs depicted gods, pharaohs, and daily life with vivid detail and color. While often stylized, Egyptian art achieved a powerful sense of clarity, symmetry, and beauty. Decline and legacy of ancient Egypt. The fall of a civilization, the rise of a legacy. Ancient Egypt, one of the most remarkable civilizations in human history, did not vanish overnight. Its decline was gradual, marked by internal strife, weakening central authority, and repeated invasions by foreign powers. By the end of the New Kingdom, circa 1070 BCE, the once mighty empire began to fracture, leading to a series of intermediate periods where local rulers vied for control. Over the centuries, Egypt fell under the sway of powerful outsiders, the Libyans, Nubians, Assyrians, and later the Persians. each ruling parts or all of Egypt at different times. In 332 BCE, Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, beginning the Ptolemaic era, which fused Greek and Egyptian cultures. The last great figure of this dynasty was Cleopatra VII, whose dramatic reign ended with Egypt's annexation by Rome in 30 BCE. From then on, Egypt became a province of successive empires, including the Byzantines and eventually the Islamic caliphates. Despite political decline, the cultural legacy of ancient Egypt endured. Its art, architecture, and religion deeply influenced the Greeks and Romans, who admired Egyptian wisdom, magic, and monumental style. Temples, obelisks, and papyri survived as symbols of Egypt's grandeur. In the modern era, the rediscovery of Egypt through archaeology reignited global fascination. The decipherment of hieroglyphics via the Rosetta Stone in 1822 and the stunning discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 captivated the world. Museums across continents house Egyptian artifacts, while Hollywood films, documentaries, and books continue to romanticize its mysteries. Today, Egypt's legacy lives on in fields as diverse as architecture, astronomy, medicine, and art. The pyramids of Giza still stand as timeless symbols of human ambition and the eternal spirit of a civilization that once ruled the Nile and inspired the world. Conclusion: timeless echoes of the Nile. Ancient Egypt remains one of the most captivating civilizations in human history, a culture that rose along the fertile banks of the Nile and left behind an enduring legacy of art, innovation, and mystique. From its powerful pharaohs and monumental pyramids to its complex religious beliefs and advances in science, Egypt's contributions have shaped the development of human civilization in profound ways. Its influence extended far beyond its time. The Egyptians pioneered architectural techniques that still baffle engineers, developed one of the earliest writing systems, and practiced medicine and astronomy with surprising accuracy. Their concept of divine kingship, belief in the afterlife, and intricate burial practices revealed a civilization deeply concerned with both worldly order and cosmic balance. Through symbols like the Ankh and the scarab, and through deities such as Osiris, Isis, and Ra, they created a worldview that connected heaven and earth in meaningful ways. In the modern world, Egypt continues to fascinate scholars and dreamers alike. Archaeological discoveries, from the Valley of the Kings to the hidden chambers of the Great Pyramid, spark headlines and imagination. Pop culture icons, such as Cleopatra and Tutankhamun, remain legendary, while museums and documentaries bring Egypt's wonders to new generations. Egyptology has become not just a field of study, but a gateway into understanding humanity's shared past. Ultimately, ancient Egypt is more than a chapter in history books. It is a symbol of what human beings can achieve when culture, knowledge, and spiritual vision come together. As long as the pyramids stand and the Nile continues to flow, Egypt's legacy will endure, whispering from the sands of time and reminding the world of a civilization that dreamed of eternity and, in many ways, achieved it. What do you think? Were the ancient Egyptians more advanced than we know? Did they possess lost technologies or knowledge from the stars? Let us know in the comments. Smash that like button if you believe in the magic of ancient Egypt. And don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into the past.